Have you ever wondered how someone who couldn't even see the world could end up changing it forever? Stay with me, because by the end of this story, you'll question everything you think you know about strength, talent, and courage. On a quiet morning in the small town of Ashwood, people stopped what they were doing whenever an old man walked down Main Street carrying a worn-out wooden toolbox. Some smiled with pity, others laughed without shame, and a few simply shook their heads. "There goes the blind carpenter," they whispered. "Poor man. He still thinks he can build something." Children copied the adults, giggling as they watched him carefully count his steps with a smooth wooden cane in one hand while holding his toolbox in the other. But the old man never argued, never became angry, and never let their words slow him down. His name was Elias, and although darkness had covered his eyes for nearly 20 years, it had never reached his heart. Every morning before sunrise, he unlocked the door of his tiny workshop on the edge of town. Inside, every hammer, every saw, every chisel, and every piece of wood had its own exact place. He didn't need his eyes to find them. His hands remembered what the world had forgotten. With gentle fingers, he traced every grain of wood, feeling tiny patterns that most people would never notice even while looking directly at them. To everyone else, they were just rough boards. To Elias, each piece of wood told its own story. Every cut, every curve, every sound of the blade guided him like music. Years ago, before losing his sight in a terrible accident, he had been known as the finest carpenter in 3 neighboring counties. Families waited months for him to build their furniture. Churches asked him to carve beautiful doors. Even the mayor proudly displayed one of Elias's handcrafted tables in his office. Then, one stormy evening, everything changed. A fire broke out while he was trying to save a young apprentice trapped inside his workshop. The boy survived, but Elias never saw another sunrise again. Most people believed that day had also buried his future. They expected him to give up, sell his tools, and disappear quietly. Instead, only a few months later, the rhythmic sound of hammer striking would echo through his rebuilt workshop once again. People couldn't understand it. "How can a blind man measure?" they asked. "How can he cut straight? How can he possibly create anything beautiful?" At first, customers stopped coming. Friends slowly disappeared. Even neighbors who once admired him crossed the street without saying hello. But Elias continued working every single day, not because someone believed in him, but because he still believed in himself. If you're enjoying this story, keep watching, because what happens next will prove that the loudest voices are often the ones who understand the least. Across the street from his workshop lived a little girl named Lily, no older than 10 years old. Unlike the adults, she never laughed. Every afternoon after school, she quietly sat outside his workshop, listening to the steady rhythm of his tools. One day, curiosity finally defeated her fear. She knocked softly on the old wooden door. "Mr. Elias," she whispered, "may I ask you something?" The old carpenter smiled warmly. "Of course, little one." She hesitated before speaking. "How do you build something if you can't see it?" For a long moment, the workshop became completely silent. Then Elias gently placed her tiny hand on a rough piece of oak. "Close your eyes," he said softly. Confused, Lily obeyed. "Now tell me what you feel." She smiled. "It's rough, but warm." Elias nodded. "Exactly. Most people only see wood. I learned to understand it." Those simple words would stay with Lily forever. though neither of them knew that very soon the entire town would learn the same lesson, in a way no one could have imagined. The next morning, dark clouds rolled across the sky like an army preparing for war. The wind howled through ashwood streets, doors slammed shut, trees bent under the force of nature, and before sunset, rain began falling harder than anyone had seen in decades. Hour after hour the river swelled, its calm waters turning into a roaring monster that swallowed everything in its path. By midnight, the old wooden bridge connecting Ashwood to the neighboring towns cracked beneath the pressure. One final thunderous roar echoed across the valley, and the bridge collapsed into the raging river below. By sunrise, the town was completely cut off. Food deliveries stopped. Medicine could no longer reach the local clinic. Farmers couldn't transport their crops, and families on the opposite side of the river were stranded with no safe way home. Fear spread faster than the flood itself. The mayor called an emergency meeting inside the town hall. Engineers from nearby counties inspected the damage and delivered heartbreaking news. "A new bridge will take at least 6 weeks," one of them said, shaking his head. The room fell silent. 6 weeks felt impossible. The clinic had enough medicine for only 5 days, and another storm was expected before the week ended. Everyone argued, everyone blamed someone else, but no one had a solution. Quietly, from the back of the room, a calm voice broke the silence. "I believe. I can build a temporary bridge." Every head turned. Standing there with his worn toolbox and wooden cane was Elias. For just a second, nobody spoke. Then laughter filled the room. Some people laughed so hard they could barely breathe. "The blind carpenter?" one man shouted. "You couldn't even find the river without help." Another scoffed, "This isn't building a chair, old man. People's lives are at stake." Even the mayor looked uncomfortable. "Elias," he said gently, "we appreciate your courage, but this work is far too dangerous." Elias didn't argue. He simply stood there with the quiet confidence that had carried him through every painful year since losing his sight. "The river hasn't changed," he replied softly. "Only people's belief has." His words lingered in the room long after the laughter faded. Lily, sitting beside her mother, looked at him with the same faith she always had. She stood up without hesitation. "I believe him." The room turned toward the little girl. "He never gives up," she continued. "If he says he can do it, maybe we should listen." Some people rolled their eyes, but a few exchanged uncertain glances. The mayor sighed deeply before making a decision that surprised everyone. "You have 3 days," he announced. "If you truly think you can build something safe enough for people to cross, we'll give you the chance." Elias smiled, nodded once, and quietly walked toward the river. The crowd followed, expecting to watch him fail before he even began. Instead of rushing, he knelt beside the broken riverbank and removed his boots. He placed his bare feet into the muddy ground, closed his sightless eyes even tighter, and listened. He listened to the current, the wind, the movement of broken logs, and the echoes bouncing between the cliffs. Then he reached down, letting the cold water flow through his fingers. "The current is stronger near the center," he murmured. "But the foundation on the eastern bank is still solid." The engineers stared at one another in disbelief. One quietly measured the river exactly where Elias had pointed. To everyone's shock, the old carpenter was right. Even without sight, he had understood the river better than anyone standing there with maps and instruments. Still, the hardest part was yet to come. Building a bridge in only 3 days seemed impossible, especially for a man everyone believed couldn't even see the wood in front of him. But as the sun disappeared behind the mountains and another storm began gathering on the horizon, Elias picked up his hammer, took a slow, steady breath, and struck the very first nail. None of the people watching realized they were witnessing the beginning of the greatest act of courage their town would ever see. And what happened on the second night would leave every single person speechless. The first strike of Elias's hammer echoed across the river, as if it carried a promise. Through the freezing nights and exhausting days, he never stopped working. While others slept, the old carpenter stood beside the broken river, measuring every beam with nothing more than his fingertips, counting every step from memory, and listening carefully to the sound each piece of timber made before placing it into position. Lily stayed beside him from sunrise until long after sunset, handing him nails, ropes, and tools before he even asked for them. Slowly, something unexpected began to happen. The same people who had laughed at him the day before stopped laughing. One farmer quietly brought fresh lumber. Another offered his horses to pull heavy beams. A blacksmith repaired broken tools without asking for payment. Even the young men who once mocked the blind carpenter found themselves carrying wood beside him in complete silence. No one ordered them to help. They simply couldn't ignore the determination of a man who refused to surrender. As the second night arrived, lightning flashed across the sky, and the unfinished bridge shook beneath powerful winds. Several workers stepped back in fear. "It's too dangerous," someone shouted. "Leave it until morning." Elias slowly placed his hand on one of the support beams and smiled. "Storms don't wait for fear to disappear," he said calmly. "Neither should courage." Those words spread through the workers like fire. One by one, they picked up their tools again. Before dawn on the third day, the final wooden beam was carefully lowered into place. The temporary bridge stood firmly across the raging river, simple in appearance but strong in design. Nobody moved. Nobody dared to cross first. The mayor looked toward the engineers, who carefully inspected every joint, every support, every rope, and every plank. Minutes felt like hours until the oldest engineer finally removed his hat, looked directly at Elias, and quietly said, "I've spent 35 years building bridges, and I have never seen craftsmanship like this." A stunned silence swept across the crowd. The mayor slowly stepped onto the bridge. Every board held steady. Then another person crossed. Then another. Within minutes, families reunited on both sides of the river. Doctors reached the clinic with desperately needed medicine. Food wagons rolled safely into town. And the people of Ashwood realized they had been saved by the very man they once believed was useless. Tears filled the mayor's eyes as he walked back toward Elias. Without saying a word, he removed the ceremonial town medal from his own jacket and pinned it onto the old carpenter's shirt. "Please forgive us," he whispered. "We judged your eyes, instead of your heart." Elias smiled gently. "Sometimes people only see what's missing," he replied. "Very few notice what's still there." Many in the crowd lowered their heads in shame. Some apologized. Others simply cried. But the moment that touched everyone the most came when little Lily ran forward and wrapped her arms around Elias. "I told them," she whispered with a smile. "I knew you could do it." The old carpenter laughed softly and rested his hand on her head. "No, Lily," he answered. "You believed before there was proof. That's far more powerful." Months later, A permanent stone bridge was built in the same place, but the people of Ashwood refused to forget the wooden bridge that had saved their town. They placed it in the town square as a symbol of hope, and beside it stood a simple plaque that read, "Built by the hands of a man who saw with his heart." Visitors traveled from distant places just to hear the story of the blind carpenter, and parents told their children that true ability is never measured by appearances. As for Elias, he returned to his small workshop the very next morning, quietly carving another piece of wood as if nothing extraordinary had happened. Fame never changed him because he had never worked for applause. He worked because building gave his life purpose. And perhaps that's the greatest lesson of all. The world will always have people who doubt you, underestimate you, or laugh before you've even begun. Let them. Your greatest answer will never be an argument. It will be the life you build through patience, courage, and quiet determination. Thank you for spending these moments with Fireside Files. If this story touched your heart, remember to like, share it with someone who needs encouragement today, and subscribe for more unforgettable stories that remind us the strongest people are often the ones the world almost overlooks. Until next time, keep believing in yourself, because sometimes the impossible is only waiting for someone brave enough to begin.